Hey everybody, welcome back to Executive Nomad Podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome Mike Pell to the show. Mike works at Microsoft. I'll let him tell you what he does over there. But from our perspective, we're talking today about how the world of work is changing at the large global corporations like Microsoft and obviously other corporates. So Mike, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Appreciate it. You're over in the US, right?
Yeah, I'm here in Manhattan in New York. So happy to be with you today.
Good. So Mike, you work at Microsoft. Tell us what you do over there.
Sure. I run the Microsoft Garage here in New York City, which is the company's worldwide innovation program, where we help our employees and customers take their ideas and their passion and go do something with it, try to bring it to life, see if there's really something there. So it's a lot of fun for me to be able to work with employees and customers all over the world to be able to show them that it's really not that hard to go from idea to something real.
I'm fascinated by that because I know when you and I spoke before, you were telling me about that. I didn't realize that. I know some of the big, I know Google has it, for example, have these sort of idea stations. But it's fascinating to see because it's not what everybody sees in corporate. Have you had experience of other companies who've sort of thought it was quite an alien?
It is. It's funny you say that. It used to be very rare that enterprises would sort of carve out either physical spaces or programs to let their employees go off and do things that are not on their to-do list or their backlog. You said, famously Google had their Moonshot and X programs where they gave people 20% time is what they used to call it. We found at Microsoft that was never going to work for us. Telling somebody they had a day a week to do whatever they wanted. We can't even have no meeting Fridays, frankly. So we had to find a different way to sort of get this into the water. And the way we did it was when our CEO, Satya Nadella, took over a little over 10 years ago, he wanted to try an experiment of hacking. He had just learned about growth hacking and hackathons. And so we put together a global hackathon to see what people would do within just a few days, if you sort of turn them loose to do whatever they wanted. It was a pretty clear signal that people wanted to bring their ideas to work. They wanted to band with people that they never had worked with before, that had very different skills, very different backgrounds, and it's a very magical time. And so to this day, that spirit still continues of curiosity and experimentation and wanting to be able to see, what can we do when we collaborate and work with people that have crazy different ideas than we do.
That's fascinating. And was this people were mixing with colleagues from other departments, other offices, etc.?
Absolutely. Yeah, we, very well documented. Microsoft was very siloed way back when. We didn't like to cooperate with each other. I've been at the company for over 20 years. So we were very competitive. And so Satya really wanted to change the culture to be more collaborative and cooperative, and again, curious, just trying to find people in different parts of the company, different parts of the world who could help to move ideas forward and really get a much better result. So to this day, we continue to be highly collaborative, which has been really good for us.
Is there any products, any services that we would know that have come out of that, out of those enterprise conversations and with these guys getting their heads together? Is there any products we'd know?
I mean, honestly, name any product that Microsoft has worked on in the last, 5 to 8 years. And it's a result of a high degree of collaboration across divisional boundaries, across team boundaries. We have to work that way now. We found out the hard way that being siloed was just not going to scale, was not going to work for us going forward. So just about everything we do has been done in that way.
Have you experienced any other companies? Have you been seconded to any or anything like that you've seen that don't work like that?
Well, I think, in your travels, I'm sure you've seen the same thing. Just about every single major company, and I get to see them all at the Garage in New York. They all, our top customers come through all the time. I get to work with C-suite execs and business leaders, and they all have innovation teams, or they have a chief innovation person, or they're doing the work to try to be more agile, more quick, more creative in what they do. The problem is that their cultures don't always support it. If you're in a highly regulated industry like banking or insurance or even medicine or big pharma for that matter, it's difficult to truly innovate. And so they're sort of stuck in the way that their machine has been designed, and it's hard to break out. So you get a lot of what I call innovation theater happening, them going through the paces and the steps, but it doesn't really result in what you would call true breakthroughs or innovations.
You think that's because Microsoft, obviously they're a software company primarily, that allows for more innovation, more trial and error, more just throwing things out there.
I
For
mean,
example, a
in
car
some
can do
ways,
it.
yeah, in some ways, you're right. Software is a very unique medium to work in because it's all intellectual, right? It's all IP, and now with the rise of vibe coding and coding agents,
Mm.
it's getting even easier for anybody, to sort of dip their toe in and try things out, as opposed to developing a new drug, or coming up with an entirely new system to do something in an industry that's highly specialized. It's not always easy to do that. I think people do have the desire. It's certainly executives who are working in these companies that are transforming or trying to transform themselves understand that they have to try to do things differently. But AI itself, of course, is not the only answer. It really lies more on the people side of the equation, which is why it's so interesting to talk to you about the changing nature of the workplace, how people, certainly we all in the pandemic had to learn to work remotely. It's funny, Microsoft really didn't miss a beat during the pandemic because we had already for years had been working that way. There was always somebody in some part of the world that was in a meeting, that just wasn't ever going to be there in person. And so we were sort of used to working in that way. But for a lot of people, it was a big shift and continues to this day. And with what's happening in the world and in business, I think it's going to accelerate even further.
Yeah, agreed. I think so. I always found it funny before because I travel so much, and I'm there's always a different background to where I'm working. I'm in my studio at the minute. But before the pandemic, just before I jump on a call, everybody had asked me where I was. That was always the first question. Now nobody ever asks. I make a point of asking because executive nomad, it's all about being global. It's all about traveling around and so on. So to me that's relevant. But if I'm in a strategy call from my communications business, nobody ever asks anymore. And that started with COVID. And this has now become the normal way and the preferred way. All the stuff I read on LinkedIn, so many people, I know it doesn't work for every corporation and every sector, but for so many people, if you can do it, productivity to my mind goes up, not down, because you've got your own environment, you've got your things around you and you're not being disturbed. That's a big thing to me. So I really think this is the future.
And I think, many of the executives who you work with and interview and chat with, I'm sure have developed habits, that were formed during COVID for how to conduct themselves remotely, and even to this day, traveling, you may bring a little, camera to put on top of your laptop because your laptop camera is not very good, or a little
Absolutely,
light to bring with you, or a better external microphone, or a stand, or a stack of books, or whatever you have around you, to put the computer up higher so the camera's at eye level. Like all those little tricks that we had to learn to be better remote partners and teammates, I think are continuing to this day.
Yeah, and the innovations going. Obviously, it's something I keep an eye on all the time because I do so much podcasts and so many podcasts and so on. The innovation that's helping this world of work to improve is fascinating all the time. There's shiny new toys ending up on my desk from FedEx regularly. Stuff that I won't use that often, but I just love them when they've been advertised. So I do think I think it's here to stay. I know there's been pushback and so on, but it's interesting to hear how the largest, Microsoft being such a large company, how they've reacted to it. And as you said, they didn't miss a beat doing it. And I'm sure that wasn't the same for all of them, but I think now that AI is upon us and now that it does so much, I think that's an even bigger push towards this remote working, and also a push towards, what Executive Nomad is about is becoming that category of one, that person that, if you're just working for a paycheck at one large corporation, that may change. That may change in the coming years. And then, so what do you do as an older executive? You've got all of this experience, all this pattern recognition as you're going through a business day. There's there's a trade-off because yes, you can work in this environment, but you don't have the interaction and the the social interaction that you have in the big offices. So I do think that's a trade-off. But making the most of it. I think I told you in our earlier conversation that I spent the winter in Malta because I could. And I didn't miss a beat. I landed in Malta with, you mentioned the camera, the good microphone and all that stuff. That goes in my grab bag, my travel bag. And 10 minutes after I landed in an Airbnb in Malta, I'm in business. I've got all of my lighting, all of my cameras, all of my microphone around me. And the client calls that I did were as if I could have been anywhere else in the world. And I think that it's not right for everybody because some people do like the interaction of the water cooler conversations, as they call them. But I think for some people, especially people looking for a bit more flexibility, I think this form of working, this form of being an executive, but still being relevant in the corporate world, but sort of doing it on your own terms. I think that has a future. I think that has a real. I think that will become a lot more normal in the not too distant future with how things are.
And of course, there's a bit of a wrench in the works now for those people, which is now they're being asked, if they use AI regularly, do they have a fleet of agents that are doing their work, with them and for them? And, this is now becoming an issue, as you said, for both executives who are, later stage in their careers or very, new grads, people who are new to the industry, very early in their career are being asked the same things. You don't always have that decade or two of experience to fall back on, as a new hire. You may be able to run circles around people with your fleet of agents doing this and that, but you don't have the context. And the flip side of that is, those who have been doing this for a very long time, even though they have all of that domain expertise, they have all of that, real world experience and, all the scars to go with it, doesn't matter because now they're being questioned as to why they aren't using, agents or AI more in what they do. And so it's a strange time. Like we're right in the middle of this transitional period and it's about to accelerate, to get even faster. And it'll be one of those things where at a certain point, everyone wondered why, you weren't using your phone to do something rather than reaching for your laptop. Now we're sort of getting to that point where people are wondering, why aren't you having an agent do that instead of do all this work yourself?
I agree. And it's obviously you're the right man to ask the question, given where you're working and so on. I think that we are going to go through these changes, but I think that there will be a made by humans era too. And we'll go back to that because everything, if you go into the office and everything is done, it's just done for you. The marketing's done. Yes, your sales director is sitting on a Mac Mini somewhere. I think that allows for better interaction because you've got more time. You've got more time to think about these conversations, and that bit means that if you and I are having a discussion or an executive is having a discussion within their sector or within their specialism, I think that allows them to explore deeper, and that's the made by human bits. Whereas if you've got all of this other stuff to do, you have less stuff to dive deeper and get that pattern recognition and that context that you mentioned. So, I mean, I might be just saying this hopefully, but I do think there's a made by humans element will come back at some point. It's just, it's all shiny toys at the minute and everyone's excited by it.
Yeah, certainly people will recognize that people are always needed. And it's true. I always come down on the side of the people first part of the equation. But, I have to say, I'm an eternal optimist, right? I would like to think that we will always be valuable in everything we do, but it's also becoming a bit of a romantic notion that a made by humans, era is going to come back. I really don't think it is.
I don't think so.
I think the world, and again, I'm an optimist here, right? And I love, when people do things together. I'm always in the office. I'm always around people, but it's going to get harder and harder and harder for you to show up as a person, as an executive, as a teammate, and really show that value that can't be done any other way. And that's what people are going to have to figure out. They have to focus on, because everybody does have that. Everyone does have their set of superpowers that really make them who they are. And the technologies are going to have to help you to amplify that and to really, really sort of go much further than you've ever gone before, because that's what it's going to take to sort of stand out among, what we just talked about, which is, all of the flood of this new digital workers and coworkers being able to do much of, the stuff that we were doing before. And if you're a marketer, right, someone may say, well, why should I hire you to do my marketing when I can get an agent to do it, practically for free? And, we know the answer, right? It's because the computer is a computer, right? It's a machine, right? It doesn't have emotions and feelings and experience and be able to sense and understand nuance in the way that people do. But that's sort of the battle that we're heading into right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do see that. And I also think that if you look at an AI model, an agent today, it could be the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But in 3 days' time, it's old news because something else has just popped up in your feed and there's something else that's overtaken and so on. So it's a fascinating time that we're in, and we'll see about the made by humans. I stick by. I think there is an element to all of this that this is just from my conversations with execs and so on. There is to not be able to do that. Where do you find yourself? You're untethered if you leave a corporation anyway. Then you get back into consulting, coaching, mentoring, that kind of stuff. I think using AI as a tool, not as the actual, as it's called an agent, of course, but just as a tool for what you do as a consultant, as a coach, I think it frees up a lot more time. If that's right, then it has absolute value. It's freeing up time to think of new things. It's freeing up time to not be work first, life after. If they can flip the script on that and still get paid, I think that works. What do you think?
Well, that's the way it should be, certainly. Yeah. But there is also, I mean, just to be clear, there is I'm going to say, an expectation rising that people will use these systems. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's
absolutely.
We sort of look at this as table stakes now, that you are fluent and can get things done and know how to go do these things. And not everybody does, and not everybody will. There's even a new trend where younger people, certainly college students, are rejecting AI. They don't want to use it, right? They understand, they're digital natives. They understand the value. They know it can do things. But as you said earlier, they like doing things for themselves. Mm-hmm. They like the people aspect. So there'll be this interesting back and forth for a little bit on all this, and we will see how it turns out. But certainly the future of work has changed. It's not a trend or some kind of a hype cycle that's just going to come and go. This technology is now embedded, just like mobile and cloud and other things that we've gone through. This is not going anywhere. And so it has to be dealt with. And that doesn't mean you have to become an AI expert, but you should at least understand what other people are doing.
How do you see that? And in the workplace, older workers, say 50 years of age, how that's being adopted and across executives and across upper managers? Are they adopting it? I'm focusing on their age and their position,
sure.
Just because it's a new technology.
Yeah, I would say, just to generalize, not everybody is thrilled. We're all creatures of habit to a certain degree, right? Nobody likes to learn anything new. We have our ways of doing things, and unless we're really pushed, we probably won't change our behavior. And so many people just aren't. They're expecting that their partners and their staff and their coworkers are going to be doing all that, and maybe they don't have to. But the truth is they do have to. They have to. I mean, even in very small ways, even just downloading, Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your favorite thing is, just, start using it, talk to it, have it try to do small things for you. We all have to at least understand what the capabilities are so we can make intelligent decisions about what to do, in certain situations and going forward. And so in general, I always tell people, don't, ask your team to go spin up some giant AI project, because that's not going to work out right away. What will work is individuals learning what it can do for them, and then sharing and banding together in small teams and seeing how they can leverage each other's learnings, to get further faster. And so that's been working for many companies.
And obviously there's a war going on between ChatGPT, Claude and ChatGPT. Who do you think is going to win from a perspective of an insider?
Impossible to say, right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the technology industry is every day is a new day.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think for focusing back on the older executives, you're right, there is a pushback on this stuff, but there was a pushback on everything, right? There's a pushback on, everything. And I think that's a very natural way to be. I think the advantage here is that somebody who's leaving corporate and who does have an understanding of it, a little bit beyond just asking it to send an email or review a document, just a sort of a higher stage of an understanding. That means that you can step into the freelance world. You can step into running a consultancy, a coaching business, or whatever it is you decide to do, and still have your team. Because until this happened, until AI, the value of AI was realized, you step outside of the corporate world and you don't have any of that stuff. You've got to work it all out yourself. All of a sudden you go from having a team around you, behind the corporate badge, to just being you. And I think with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of training and so on, and a little bit of acceptance of where we're going with all of this, you can step into a consulting role or a coaching role and have a team around you that gets all that stuff done as well. You just got to kind of understand how that works, and not necessarily do it yourself, build those agents yourself. There's plenty of places to go now online and get those agents to take care of it for you. So I do think there's very much an advantage of using it as a tool. I think it's a big plus for a lot of executives coming out, as long as we get that uptake on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're about to enter a new phase. So this sort of started out as an individual thing, right? We were all using ChatGPT and other AI systems when they came out. at Microsoft, we integrated Copilot and agents to just about everything we do. So there's always your assistant that's there to help you. But the new phase that we're moving into collectively is an agent as a teammate or a coworker. So right now, there's sort of a personal thing that each of us use individually, but they will soon become teammates. So as if you and I are in a virtual team of 3 other people and we're working on a project, there may actually be an agent that joins our Teams calls, at some point in the future, who's an expert in marketing or legal or some other aspect that maybe no one else on the team is, and they will participate just like any other teammate would participate in these things. So that's a shift in the workplace that is coming up, will be very, very interesting.
I think if anyone really wants to know what that'll look like, they should just look at Star Trek from 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
They could just, it's all becoming very real.
Yes, no, you're right about that.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I'm really excited about it. I think it's such an advantage, but I fully understand from the people that I talk to that there's that sort of, there's that reticence of the uptake, and a lot of people think they're too old for it as well. A lot of people that I talk to say, I've done what I do and I've learned it and I did it all without AI. Well, when was the last time you used a fax machine? So, the things are moving on all the time. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So in terms of the future of a company like Microsoft, how do you see the management layers changing from C-suite down to middle managers?
Yeah, I think just in general, I mean, not just with Microsoft, but, any large company anywhere in the world is grappling with what we have been for the last decade, which is how do we do more with less? How do we go faster? How do we be better at what we do? And technology has been an accelerator, and it's been something that's helped us, to do some of that. But every large company is sort of dealing with the same issue right now, which is there's a narrative that says, maybe I don't have to hire so many people. Maybe I can let some of my staff go. Maybe, we can compete in new markets with all this technology. And so it's an odd time, because right when people should be looking at new growth opportunities, they're looking at operational efficiencies as ways of saving money on the bottom line, rather than how do they stay in business? How do they compete? How do they they deal with this startup that comes out of nowhere that's there to eat their lunch. So it's the same. It's like more of the same that's been happening over the last decade, but now it's going much faster. This whole thing is moving at such a rapid clip. It's hard to make great decisions because even the pace of major decision making has been quickened. So, everyone's dealing with the same thing. How do we do more with less? How do we go further faster? But how do we do it in a very cost efficient way? And that's what leads to this conversation about AI and machine learning agents and so forth.
How do you see it in 10 years from now?
I like to joke that I'm from the future. It's hard to tell. I'm a big fan of Ray Kurzweil and, what he's written about the acceleration. So we're sort of in the very exponential part of that curve, and it's getting faster and faster. And it's hard to imagine, but innovation and change is happening at an exponential pace, even faster than anybody could have ever imagined. So hard to understand where we'll be in 10 years, given where we've been in the last 3 years, right? Since the introduction of, sort of ChatGPT burst into the scene, everything sort of changed around that. And here we are in a very different place. So now, multiply that, times, 3, 4, 5 times, and who knows where we're going to be. But I think, as you said earlier, there will always be a place for people, always. I'm a big believer in that. But the onus is on us individually. No one's going to come to help you and save you, right? You have to figure out what you're great at and really double down on that. And that's sort of the path forward for all of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely wise words. I absolutely agree. I think it's been fascinating to talk to somebody at in that space who understands it so much, because obviously we see we're inundated by information, and actually to break it down, because you can just get blinded to it all. There's just so much going on. As I said, what's cutting edge today is old school tomorrow. So I think that's been really fascinating. Mike, what would you give in terms of your thoughts, in terms of your advice for an older executive who's heading out of the corporate world and into the scary world of entrepreneurialism and self-employment and so on?
The funny thing is, so I'm an entrepreneur. I started my own companies. I've been in Silicon Valley, venture-backed startups. So I have many years of experience doing all that. Now is the best time, believe it or not, to go off and do your own thing because of all the technologies. You can go from idea to working prototype in no time with vibe coding. It's so easy to go find funding sources, meaning, maybe not landing your deals, but where do I look? Who do I talk to? How do I approach it? There's so much help available by using these AI systems as collaborators, right? And as trusted advisors to help you set up your business, to sort of figure out where your customers might be, what can you charge, how do I go to market? I mean, all of that information is at your fingertips now. So in many ways, you don't need to hire a big team. You don't need to go rent an office necessarily, like you were saying earlier. Like, we all have this go bag now where we can be anywhere and be able to do our best work. So I think now is actually one of the best times ever to go off and do your thing.
What a great way to wrap up the show. I think that's great. Mike, thank you very much for your time, your insights. It's been really valuable. It's fun, as I said, hearing from somebody on the inside, where you think this world is going for the executives who've got to make some decisions in the next 6 months or a year or whatever. So thank you very much for your time, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie. See you soon.